Okay, today's class is we're basically starting on business and money management and all this other stuff. A lot of it is common sense, but some people have not been taught common sense. 4A through 4E. So unit, I guess this is unit 3. Oh, this board writes a whole lot better. Unit 3 is going to be 4A through 4E. And the first one is basically a lot of reading in the 4A, a lot of common sense. A lot of definitions, not a lot of definitions, but I don't know how to spell sense, but anyway, whatever. You know, some things you might want to write down. Cash flow, how much money you got coming in, income, debt, budget. Those are some things that you might want to write down. Cash flow is how much money you got coming in. Cash flow can be the same as income, but cash flow is usually with businesses and money coming in to pay the bills for the business. Income is more of a private income that you're bringing in to pay your bills. Debt is what you accumulate. And budget is, if you do get in trouble, you need to start doing a budget. Budget is basically rationing out your income. You know, and then some of the first things they talk about in this section is you know, if you're in the Marlboro Club and you buy a pack of cigarettes for $5, I don't know how much they are, but I'm just using 5 for a number, and you smoke, I don't know, a pack a day, so that's 7 packs a week. 7 times 52, 7 times 52, 7 times 5 is 350, and then 2 times 7 is 364. So that's 364 a week. 300. I'm sorry. I lost my 365 days. I'm sorry. 365 days. I don't know why I did that. 365 days times 5. That comes out to be 2, 5 times 6, that's 2, 3, 5 times 3, that's almost $2,000 a year. I don't know about y'all, but that's a lot of money for a pack of cigarettes. So, now, what is this? Well, this is a little bit of common sense. Okay? The things that you buy at all these coffee places, these lattes and stuff, or whatever they're called, same concept. If you buy one a day and it's $5, you're talking about, you know, a good bit of money. And that's some of the things that some people don't think about. And in this chapter, we start thinking about that. And that way, hopefully, some of these people that go out and spend crazy amounts of money, where is my, oh, there it is. Crazy amounts of money, maybe you will, what is wrong with this thing? Okay. I guess I have to use the mouse. I would be so glad when we get some kind of training on these stupid boards. So, this section is talking about a lot of you know, common sense, and I'm just going to go ahead and tell you to read 4A because you know, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on 4A. What I would like to talk about is 4B. .4b talks about interest, and I would like to talk about interest because that is something very important. Very, 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 next to income tax, that's probably one of the most important things that you can talk about. First type is called simple interest. Simple interest, I like to tell people, simple interest is something that, a friend of yours might use, or, okay, what is wrong with this thing? I just hit erase and it's not erasing. Do you want to clear the screen? Okay, what is wrong with this thing? It's not responding to anything I do. Okay, that worked. Oh, I know what. I bet I know. I bet you. Hold on just a second. No, that's not all. I don't understand why it's not working. Yeah, it is on. I don't want that. I want that off. Turn that off. Won't go off now. Great. Maybe I need to just use this. Okay, I'm sorry. It's not letting me do anything. I get so tired of dealing with this stuff. Now let's try it. There. Okay, simple interest. Simple interest, I like to tell people that use like friend or family. My father would always sell stuff, especially land. And sometimes he would sell land to people and at 6% interest, or whatever the case may be. So he would take a piece of property, let's say he'd sell a piece of property for $5,000. And he would give the person 5 years to pay it off, pay in monthly payments. But he would charge 6% interest. Simple interest, meaning that just multiply 6%, blah, blah, blah. So you would take that 6% and you would multiply it through and multiply 6%. Let's do 10% for, I don't have a calculator with me and I don't feel like doing a lot of math. So let's change this to 10% interest, which he would never charge that, but 10% interest. Well, 10% of $5,000 is what? $500. So at the end of 5 years, you should pay him $5,500. So you take that and divide that by 5 years times 12, 60 months, and that would be your payment. Okay? For a monthly payment. Now, like I said, that's what simple interest is. Letting a friend borrow $100, and at the end of the year, pay it off, and he owes you $110 at the end of the year, or end of the month, or whatever the case may be. Now, think about some of your loan sharks. They don't charge 10%, they charge like 50%. So if you borrow $200, you got to pay them $300 back. So you want to try to stay away from high interest, no matter if it's a friend or no matter if it's a loan shark or a credit card. Now, simple interest is not done. Excuse me. Simple interest is not done with businesses. Usually it's done with friends or family. Hopefully you don't do family, because family and loaning money does not work. So let's keep it with friends, and that's simple interest. So you take the principal, which is $5,000, borrowing $5,000 for 5 years, and you want to make monthly payments. Well, you take the 5,000 times 10%, which is 500. 500 plus 5,000 is 5,500, and you divide that by 60 months, and that would be your monthly payment. Okay, so that's simple interest. Compound interest. We'll move over to compound interest, or it should be next. Well, it talks about powers and roots, so let's go over some roots. Again, this is a lot of, don't want to insult your intelligence, but it's a lot of stuff that you probably already know, but we go over it just in case. Now, of course, I'm going to go over the law of exponents right quick. Law of exponents that you learned back in pre-algebra and algebra 1. X to the n times x to the m is equal to x to the n times n. M. That's your product rule. And then x to the n divided by x to the m is equal to x to the n minus m, and that is your quotient rule. And then x to the n raised to the m power is equal to x, that's supposed to be a plus, I'm sorry, plus m. I'll rewrite that. And x to the n times m, and that's your product rule. Your power rule. So, let's rewrite this. N plus m. So those are the three. There's about 5, but these are 3 that you're going to work with a good bit. I'll give you an example of this one. X, let me bring this down a little bit. So let's do some examples. X to the second times x to the fourth is equal to x to the 2 plus 4, which is equal to x to the 6th. X to the fourth divided by x to the third is equal to x to the 4 minus 3, which is equal to x to the first, or x. And x to the fifth raised to the second power is equal to x to the 5 times 2, which is equal to x to the 10th. So those are some simple product or simple rules with exponents. You also got to remember some of these basic rules. Any number raised to the 0 power is equal to 1. Any number raised to the first power is that number. I tell a story all the time when I have a neighbor, and she bought a calculator for her son or daughter, and she was trying to figure out how to use it, and she called me one night, mad, frustrated. She spent $125 on this graphic calculator, and it won't even tell her what 1 to the 29th power is. Well, any number, I'm not talking about any number. 1 raised to the 29th power, 1 raised to any power is equal to 1. And the calculator kept giving her the right answer. She just didn't know that 1 to the 29th power was equal to 1, or whatever the case was. So you need to remember that one also. And remember that an exponent is basically x to the 5th power is basically multiplying x times x times x times x times x 5 times. Not, don't think if you raise 2 to the 5th power, it's not 2 times 5. All right, 2 to the 5th power. 2 to the 5th power is equal to 32. 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. Do not say 5 times 2 because that's not correct. You're multiplying it by itself again and again and again. Okay? So make sure this is not 2 times 5. Okay? This is not equal to 2 times 5. It's equal to 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. Okay? So there's your basic rundown of exponential rules. You're going to use the exponent in, I'm going to show you 2 more rules right quick. The next rule is, the next 2 rules that you may see is 1 over x to the negative n, or x to the negative n over 1. Whenever you have a negative exponent, you can flip it and it becomes a positive exponent. So this would be x to the n over 1. And this would be 1 over x to the n. This is called the inverse rule. The inverse rule basically addresses negative exponents. The inverse rule. And I always tell students, if you've got a negative exponent, first thing you do is put it over 1, so you know to flip it and make it a positive exponent. And there's one last rule, and that is the inverse power rule. And the inverse power rule looks like this. X to the n over x to the m raised to the negative w power. Now, first of all, this and this is not the same. This has got parentheses around it, and that's supposed to be a y. I'm sorry. Let me take that out and put a y. It's going to be a different exponent. And these are all same bases. These are the one before. This one is if you have 2 terms and they've got exponents and you got a negative. You can flip these 2 terms. Sorry. You can flip those 2 terms and the w becomes positive. Nothing happens on the inside of the parentheses as far as sign. Remember, this is parentheses, this is not. 2 totally different problems. And that's called the inverse power rule. Okay, and you're going to be using some of these with interest problems. Good example of this one, the inverse rule, would be x to the 5th, negative 5th. Well, if you just give an x to the negative 5th and it says write as in terms of positive exponent, the first thing you'll do is put it over 1. And then flip it. And you get 1 over x to the 5th. And sometimes you'll be given something like 1 over x to the negative 2. Well, if you're given like that, you flip it, and that becomes x squared. So there's 2 examples of the inverse power rule, or the inverse rule. And that's a little review over some of your exponential rules. Again, you'll probably remember them, but I need to go over them because some people, it's been a while since you've had algebra. So, the next thing, make sure you understand these 2 definitions on page 199. Very important. Especially compound interest. And there is the compound interest formula. Now, I'm going to write it the way they have it, but that's not the way. Remember, I don't like this book, so I'm not going to write it like that. A is equal to P times 1 plus APR raised to the Y power. Okay, I don't use that because that's not the way it's written in the real world. The way it's written in the real world is A is equal to P times 1 plus R over T, I want to say R over T, raised to the NT power. Okay, now that's, I think that's right. Now see, they're supposed to show you what APR is and they don't, so that's why I don't like the way they have that APR. You can go to Google and pull it up. Let's go to our handy dandy Google page. Let's see. There we go. Compound interest formula. There it is, R over N. My bad. R over N raised to the NT power. And we'll just pull that up. There we go. View image. There it is. Alright, so there it is. I made a mistake. R over N. Okay, we're not. Okay. Why isn't it working? So I don't use this, and I would probably tell you not to, because you're gonna, if you go into a bank and they ask you, or you go into a bank and you're working at the bank, I'm sorry, and they ask you to write down the formula or do the compound interest formula, they're going to expect you to know this. They're not going to ask you to do that. So what is P? P is your principal. That's what you're putting in. So like if you're a savings account, that's what you're putting in. Those are the dollars that you put in. Like a savings account, you start at $5,000. 1 will always be there. N is the number of times it's compounded. Now, what I like to tell students about compounded, just think a computer, okay? The computer runs a program, and let's say if it's, and that's what also important, if it's yearly, compounded yearly, it'll say annually, that's 1 time a year, so the computer goes through and does its calculation 1 time a year. 2 times a year would be semi-annually. 3 times a year or 4 times a year would be quarterly. 12 times a year would be monthly. And of course, 365 would be daily, but not many banks are going to compound daily. So compound means that the computer goes through its thing and picks up your account, and you have $5,000 in there, and the computer is going to go through, and if it's done annually, that 1 time a year, like on December 31st, it'll run and say $5,000 times how much interest, and give you $5,050 instead of $5,000 at the end of the year, because it compounds once a year. and the bank will put $50 in your savings account for keeping that money in there, or whatever the interest is. And that is your compound. So the compound is basically the number of times per year that the computer at the bank goes through and gives you interest on your money. The more times you do it, the better. So a lot of people try to do at least monthly, compounded monthly on a savings account. R is the rate at which the bank is telling you keep the money in the bank, and that is going to be a decimal. If it's 45% on a 4.5%, then that's going to be 0.045%. Okay, so make sure you understand that. T is how many years you keep the money in the bank. Years you keep the money in the bank. So if you keep, most of the time it's like over 5 years, because the bank's not going to give you much interest if you don't keep it in there a good amount of time. So this is a very, 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 very important formula. So make sure you know that one backward. Make sure you know that one backwards and forwards. Okay, because we're going to be using that a good bit. Okay? And I think I'm going to cut the video off right there, but I would like for you to go ahead and start reading 4.1 or 4, what is this? 4A and 4B, and start working on the homework for 4A and 4B. Okay? And I will see y'all Tuesday.